Across our proud land today, joy and solemnity, a celebration of our great national document, the United States Constitution, 200 years old and still growing. Good evening from Washington. Dan Rather with the CBS Evening News, reporting tonight from our nation's capital. Our Constitution in action, making headlines here this evening on several fronts. On arms control, the U.S. Secretary of State and the Soviet foreign ministers stop the clock and keep on talking. On Biden for president, the candidate admits to a plagiarism charge in law school. On Bork for the court, the nominee bristles and backs off more of his past opinions. On stopping terror, an accused hijacker is brought from the Middle East to face U.S. justice. First now, about today's talks here with the Soviets. CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent Bob Schieffer has the optimistic latest.
The negotiators were all smiles as they sat down.
We are beginning today in a good mood.
And by mid-afternoon, their spokesmen were harmonizing in duet.
We believe this is our first joint appearance.
History is in the making. We must wait a little bit.
Right.
That was the first hint that things were moving along, and by late today, the two new friends were back to announce an agreement to explore reliable ways to verify nuclear tests, with a long-range goal of eventually stopping them completely, something the superpowers haven't discussed since 1980.
In these negotiations, the sides, as the first step, will agree upon effective verification measures which will make it possible to ratify the U.S.-USSR Threshold Test Ban Treaty of 1974 and Peaceful Nuclear Explosions Treaty of 1976.
This process, among other things, would pursue as the first priority the goal of the reduction of nuclear weapons and ultimately their elimination.
No one expects that to happen anytime soon, but the announcement is one more sign, an agreement to remove all medium and short-range nuclear missiles in Europe. The big-ticket item at these talks is more likely than ever. Even so, as the president returned to the White House tonight, his remarks suggested the deal is not quite done. In fact, there were a lot of words around, as there always are in Washington. Nothing official yet, but the general feeling tonight is that the two sides will announce sometime tomorrow that an agreement is in sight. One official speculates it could all be wrapped up in 4 to 8 weeks, which means it could be done in time for a summit in November, if that's what the two sides decide to do. Dan?
Bob, what's happened to the talk that President Reagan may have made too many concessions, and how does the military feel about this?
Well, it's an interesting question, and they're a bit uneasy about it, I suppose. As a matter of fact, the commander of the Strategic Air Command said today that if the missiles are, in fact, taken out of Europe, he's going to recommend that a lot of B-52s be based in Europe, which, of course, is where we were when they put the missiles in the first place.
Bob Schieffer. Concerning one of his biggest defense policy fights with the Soviets, President Reagan lost a round today in the U.S. Senate. The Senate's new defense budget bill would restrict testing of Mr. Reagan's so-called Star Wars missile defense. The measure says all Star Wars testing must comply with a strict interpretation of the 1972 ABM treaty with the Soviets. An extraordinary news conference today by a presidential candidate under fire. Joe Biden admitted to plagiarism back in law school. He did so amid accusations that some of his most effective speeches now include quotations from others without credit. Our national affairs correspondent Leslie Stahl is here to report on Joe Biden's explanation in his own words. Leslie?
Dan, as you said, Joseph Biden admitted today that he committed plagiarism when he was in law school. He said it was a mistake, but that it was unintentional.
I've done some dumb things, and I'll do dumb things again. I've done some dumb things as a senator, done some dumb things as a lawyer. But what I haven't done, and I suggest to you, is a matter of my character. Ask anyone whatever whom I've had a relationship with. And if they tell you Joe Biden is not as straight as an arrow, I'll be very surprised.
Biden released his record from Syracuse University Law School, where he graduated near the bottom of his class. An official report stated that he had copied 5 pages from a law review article without attribution. He was disciplined, but not expelled.
You'll all be the judge, and the people be the judge. I think there's much ado about nothing.
Biden blamed his troubles on dirty tricks, hinting that another campaign was circulating the charges. It is true that Congressman Richard Gephardt's campaign passed out materials on Biden's plagiarism to reporters on Capitol Hill. It's not a coincidence, Biden said, that the story surfaced just as he started chairing the Bork hearings.
I don't know where all this stuff will go with regard to your present situation. Hang on tight.
Committee members of both parties supported Biden's claim that the Fuhrer would not undermine his leadership at the hearings.
The disclosures he made today, I think, point out his character strength.
You get back to the basic question, is Joe Biden a person of integrity? And my answer is that he is.
Biden dismissed charges that in his campaign he's been stealing quotes from other politicians and referred to an Iowa debate when he borrowed long passages from British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock without attribution.
And I started thinking as I was coming over here, why is it that Joe Biden is the first in his family ever to go to a university?
Why am I the first Kinnock in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university?
Biden said that he often quoted Kinnock with attribution.
What I should have said, to paraphrase Neil Kinnock, it's the only time I didn't, and all the times I've ever used it.
But CBS News found a tape of a second instance.
I was thinking to myself, why was it that I'm the first person, the first Biden, in probably 1,000 generations, to get to go to a university.
Late today, Biden's office called to say there had been a second instance and that the senator had not meant to be misleading. Meanwhile, Democrats were assessing the damage to Biden's campaign.
This is Joe Biden's week in the sun. And Joe Biden walked out on center stage and there was a huge spot on his tie. The problem he has is that people were going to be paying attention to him this week, and what they found out was something that wasn't especially attractive about him.
Biden says he is in the campaign to stay, but he has been languishing at the bottom of the pack, and some political consultants wonder if he can survive this issue. Dan?
Well, Leslie, is it survivable? Does a candidate get over something like this when he's running for president?
Well, in Biden's case, it's really too soon to tell. It has to settle a little more, but Jesse Jackson survived in 1984, got over his anti-Semitic remark by apologizing, so I think you can survive, yes.
Thank you, Leslie. Supreme Court nominee Robert Bork again today tried to distance himself from some of his own past writings and opinions and sell himself as a moderate. Bork claimed again today, on issues from free speech to individual rights, that he had no intention of overturning past Supreme Court precedents. He expressed frustration today over continued criticism of his views about the rights of women and minorities, including blacks. There was continued acrimony, too, over Bork's role in the firing of Special Watergate prosecutor Archibald Cox 14 years ago.
The American people rely on the Congress to protect them from abuses of the power by the executive branch. But Judge Bork, whenever Congress has tried to curb abuses, you always seem to side with the president. You broke the law in Watergate when you obeyed President Nixon and fired Archibald Cox.
I must say, I think those are most unfair characterizations of my views. Let me start, I hardly know where to start, that I broke the law in Watergate. I said yesterday that I did not break the law in Watergate. There is no existing court opinion that says I did.
You said there's no existing opinion? There certainly is.
There is not. That was a vacated opinion, Senator.
Oh, but the opinion is there.
Well, it's in print. It has been declared to have no legal force or effect whatsoever.
Mr. Chairman, once again, we heard Senator Kennedy suggest that you broke the law when you followed President Nixon's order to fire Archibald Cox. Now, that is false. No court opinion remains valid today, or even remains on the book, that says that you have broken the law.
The Bork hearings continue tomorrow. Big news day here, but nothing in Washington today attracted more notice than the birthday partying for our U.S. Constitution. It was an occasion wherever freedom rings around the world. But attention centered on Philadelphia, where 200 years ago this afternoon, delegates from 12 states signed the newly minted Constitution, touching off an experiment and debate we are still engaged in. Susan Spencer was there as Philadelphia remembered.
Proclaim to one and all that the grand federal procession is underway!
The bugles blared, the marchers marched, and the heavens opened. No matter, Philadelphia was celebrating.
I'm in love with the Constitution, I'm in love with America, and this is just a great day.
The organizers of this event had a big enough challenge even without rain. How do you translate the lofty, somber ideals of the Constitution into a fun-filled day? The answer seemed to be, use a lot of flags, go heavy on the traditional, and don't be too literal about it. Though efforts were made to portray specific elements of the document, the overall theme was just the important part, we the people. As we were, these are descendants of the original signers, and as we are, this is the synchronized briefcase drill team. There were Miss Americas and Miss Liberties, and mostly everybody else, a point noted by the president.
People from every corner of the world can come to this country and become an American.
All afternoon, the 200th anniversary celebration continued, and tonight there is more. High atop City Hall, a newly scrubbed William Penn seems to be watching it all. Wonder what he thinks. Susan Spencer, CBS News, Philadelphia.
An important program night. Tonight at 9, 8 Central Time, Walter Cronkite will be in charge of a special broadcast here on CBS, We the People 200, the Constitutional Gala. And still ahead on the CBS Evening News tonight, the most controversial stop on the Pope's American trip. Also, a sting operation at sea brings a suspected Middle Eastern skyjacker face-to-face with American justice.
There's a spirit growing all across the USA, feeling getting stronger. Spirit of the new ERA, a feeling of pride about what we do, helping make your American dream come true.
We can help make your American dream come true, faster and easier.
Helping make your American dream come true, the new ERA.
You don't have to look very far to find some high-performance luxury sports coupes with impressive performance credentials. You really don't have to look any farther than Mazda's all-new MX-6 GT, a turbocharged, intercooled 12-valve road machine that'll outrun those other guys and run you anywhere from 10 to 30,000 less.
A better value in high-performance luxury sports coupes comes from our intense commitment to your total satisfaction. That's the Mazda way.
There are over 500,000 doctors in America, and they catch colds just like you. So, which cold medicine would doctors take for their own achy colds with congestion and sneezing? In a nationwide survey for their own achy colds, more doctors said they take the formula in Dristan than the formulas in Sudafed, Actifed, and Dimetap combined.
I'm going to take what doctors would take. Wouldn't you?
Dristan, with the formula more doctors would take.
For the first time, U.S. agents have arrested a citizen and immediately brought him to court. CBS News law correspondent Rita Braver has that story.
A motorcade bearing accused Lebanese hijacker Fawaz Yanis sped into federal court in Washington today, the culmination of Operation Goldenrod, a historic FBI snatch operation.
This represents the first overseas arrest by United States law enforcement officials of a suspected terrorist that is being sought under United States laws.
Yanis was lured by boat into international waters in the Mediterranean, captured Sunday, transferred to a U.S. aircraft carrier, and flown to Washington for arraignment today. He's charged in the June 1985 hijacking of a Royal Jordanian airline flight at Beirut Airport. Yanis has been brought here to stand trial because 4 Americans were held hostage on the plane. In a 2-day ordeal, Shiite Muslim hijackers who were protesting Palestinian involvement in Beirut threatened to kill the passengers. After hopscotching the Mediterranean, the plane returned to Beirut, where the passengers were released unharmed, but the hijackers blew up the plane. Officials refused to disclose many details of the operation because they hoped to use the technique again. But sources say an extensive network of undercover informants and agents was employed. It was an all-American operation because the U.S. did not want to ask for help from any country worried about retaliation against its own citizens. Rita Braver, CBS News at the FBI.
Republican and Democratic leaders in the House have cut a deal to extend what is called humanitarian aid to Nicaraguan Contras. House Speaker Jim Wright said today he would go along with a plan to spend $3.5 million to keep the Contras fed and clothed until November. Wright also said he sees real hope for a ceasefire in Central America by that time. Negotiators for the United Auto Workers and Ford Motor Company today reached tentative agreement on a new 3-year contract for 104,000 union members. The agreement provides for greater job protection and pay raises. It must still be approved by local leaders and the rank and file. And in Toronto today, Canadian Auto Workers and Chrysler Corporation's Canadian subsidiary signed a tentative agreement ending a 3-day strike. The U.S. government today reported that housing construction in August fell 1.5% to the slowest pace in more than 4 years. Trying to revive the Graham-Rudman budget balancing law. It features a new system for making automatic spending cuts unless legislation is adopted to reduce the deficit. There's no guarantee either President Reagan or the Congress will support this new plan. Pope John Paul II took his American pilgrimage up the Pacific coast today. He flew from Los Angeles to Monterey, where Mayor Clint Eastwood called him the biggest thing to happen around here in a long time. At an outdoor mass, the Pope took up the cause of migrant workers. He called on landowners to respect their brothers and sisters who work the land. Next stop for the Pope, the Golden Gate in San Francisco, where some women and homosexuals are planning protests. Correspondent John Blackstone reports on the agony and the anger of San Francisco's gay community.
It has always been known that if there is trouble on this tour, it could come in San Francisco.
Because here is where the eyes of the gay world as well as the Roman world will be focusing as far as confrontation.
The fears are so real that church officials signed a peace treaty with homosexual Catholics.
I'm very happy to sign this.
The Pope is visiting San Francisco's historic Mission Dolores, now a parish that is largely homosexual.
The Pope's stop here was arranged as part of the peace treaty. For the first time, the pontiff will meet people who have AIDS. One of them is John Lococo.
Rome's far away. You know, we're rolling out bandages here. So we really don't have time to hear that this is wrong and that is wrong.
While John Lococo is inside Mission Dolores, another Catholic with AIDS, Leonard Matlovich, will be outside among the protesters.
I really don't think he cares. I think he has a political agenda, his agenda, but I don't think he cares about people with AIDS.
For many gay Catholics, the papal visit has presented a difficult choice. Do they show respect, or do they protest his teaching that their lifestyle is intrinsically evil?
We pray that when our Pope visits our city, that he will experience Jesus from us and see how beautiful and how good we are.
The AIDS crisis has transformed San Francisco's homosexual community.
For our sick, especially for Father Bob Hartman,
No longer a place of free and easy sex, it is now more like a closely knit small town in crisis.
Ted Hathaway, Fred Powell, Larry Bird.
In San Francisco, AIDS has reunited the church with many of its wayward members. The Pope may strengthen this new bond with words of comfort, but there remain fears he could weaken it with words of condemnation. John Blackstone, CBS News, San Francisco.
A Pentagon report today says women serving with the Navy and the Marine Corps in the Pacific are sexually harassed and abused by their male colleagues, ignored for promotions, and humiliated as human beings. Defense Secretary Weinberger today ordered a task force to work on trying to end sex discrimination throughout the U.S. military. On this birthday of the U.S. Constitution, the House of Representatives passed a bill intended to pay for what one member called the worst violation of constitutional rights in this century. It would give more than $1 billion to Japanese Americans who were held in U.S. internment camps during World War II, imprisoned simply because of their Japanese ancestry. The Senate is expected to pass a similar bill, but the White House is threatening a presidential veto. We, the people of the United States. The opening words of the document which weaves together the many threads of this nation. Each year, 1 million people come here to the rotunda of the National Archives to view the Constitution. Today, there were some very special visitors.
That I will support and defend the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America.
25 new Americans. The Constitution guarantees their liberties just as much as it did those of the men who signed the document. This great room is part museum, part shrine. But unlike those of some other nations, this Constitution is neither a religious relic nor a dusty piece of memorabilia. It is a living document. As CBS News chief political correspondent Bruce Morton now reminds us from the birthplace of the Constitution,